Prynawn da, good afternoon everybody. Welcome to the IIRSM Wales branch. We haven't had one for a while, so this is a bit new to us to run a seminar. I think it was October, November last year we ran the last seminar, so thank you all for coming and attending. We're fortunate enough today to have a fantastic speaker, Quentin Emery, and we'll come on to Quentin in a minute, so we hope you give him a nice warm welcome. Just a couple of housekeeping things. Just to let you know that we've had 2 new members for the IIRSM Wales Branch Committee Board, and that's Mark Lewis and Trevor Johnson, so I'd like to welcome them on board. And that gives us a bit more resilience as a group to hold these meetings, hopefully once a month to start with, and then maybe once every other couple of months then for next year. So keep an eye out on the Wales Branch page on LinkedIn and on the IIRSM website for upcoming seminars. We're going to hopefully arrange one next month in person in Carmarthen, but there will be a dial-in option to attend via Teams, so we're working on that at the moment, so keep your eye out for that. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Quentin Emery. He's a principal consultant for Raya de Marsh. He's an excellent presenter and facilitator. Quentin has been a professional learning and development consultant since 2000. He utilises a wide range of participative training methods within the classroom, one-to-one coaching sessions and in conference facilitation. All of his clients report that he is engaging, positive and passionate style of delivery sets him apart from other consultants. He has facilitated a huge number of events and conferences in the UK, Europe, Asia, Middle East and in the USA. As lead consultant, he has organised and undertaken safety cultural assessments with large organisations in diverse sectors such as shipping, logistics, utilities, manufacturing and food production. He fosters close, strong relationships with his clients and has helped them to improve their safety culture. So there's a lot to live up to, Quentin, on your profile, and we look forward to hearing from you. So enough about me. I shall pass across to Quentin, who will start his presentation. So thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Julie. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Quentin Emery, work for Raya de Marsh OCADE, which stands for Organisational Culture and Individual Development. I'm going to give you a roughly 45-minute presentation on cultural safety leadership, and then there'll be 10 to 15 minutes for questions at the end. So in terms of the content of the presentation, I'll give you a summary of our approach at Raya de Marsh. Talk a little bit about what behavioural safety leadership is, look at what cultural safety is, human error and human fallibility, and therefore the need to have a just culture. Just culture is a term coined by a man called James Reason. He says if you've got a problem with mosquitoes, you don't keep swatting them, you go and you find the swamp that they've come from. So it's about getting to the root cause of the problem, not just treating the symptom that's in front of you. But the way that we do it is in a fair and consistent analytical way. Excuse me. That's why we call it a just culture, as in justice. We're fair with people. So we'll have a look at what that is. Our approach then at Raya de Marsh, usually when we start working with companies, we'll carry out a safety culture assessment to find out where the current culture is. Leading on from that, there will probably be a need for some sort of safety leadership training, especially for those at sort of first line management level, team leaders, supervisors, because they are the ones that drive the behaviours on the front line day to day. The front line people then need to know what it is we're trying to do in terms of improving the culture, so we do frontline awareness. But training on its own doesn't change anything. It's all about what happens afterwards. So we bring in safety improvement teams who go around and speak to people and find out the things that need to be improved, and then they fix them. And these safety improvement teams are usually made up of frontline employees who want to get their involvement and ownership as much as possible. Other help that we can give is help with embedding the new culture, because it's very easy to snap back to the way things were before. We'll do help with incident and accident investigation, well-being and engagement, but also about putting safety positively, because safety sometimes has very negative viewpoints on it. When we do a safety culture assessment, we usually assess 10 to 20% of the workforce or area if we're doing it on a smaller scale. That gives us a representative sample across the business. One thing we stipulate is that managers and frontline people have to be assessed separately. Then people can feel free to speak their mind and say the way that things really are. All the information that we get, we treat confidentially, and all the statements that we get are treated as anonymous as well. We do the assessments face to face. We like to have discussions with people, and we'll talk to them and ask them about the 5 areas that make up a safety culture. And I'll talk in a little bit about what they are. And when we produce the report, we'll share the details with the company, obviously, and make comparisons with other companies in the same sector as them, as well as similar ones. When we do a safety culture assessment, we'll assess it against this model of ours, a safety culture development model. Basically, it's a game of snakes and ladders. The aim is to try and get as high up as you can with your safety culture. The worst kind of culture you can have is the red box at the bottom. That's an avoidance of safety. That's where we don't really do anything about health and safety until we just crack on and keep doing the job. Doesn't matter that we're having lots of accidents or we're hurting lots of people. We just keep going. You don't get to stay at that level for very long nowadays before you'll have a serious accident that puts you out of business, or something a bit less serious happens and you'll get forced to move up to the orange box, which is minimal compliance. Now, that's a very reactive culture. We don't really do anything about health and safety until it's gone wrong. And then we just fix that one thing and carry on as we did before. So just the bare minimum and very reactive. Those 2 levels are illegal in the UK today. You've got to do more than that when it comes to health and safety. The first legal level is the yellow box, which is called broad compliance. That's where we broadly comply with what the HSE tell us we have to do. So we set up a health and safety department, have a health and safety manager, we give people procedures to follow, we train them, we give them equipment, we count how many accidents we've had and how many people we've hurt, and we tell the HSE. Now, in our 25 years experience at Ryder Marsh, working with about 600 companies all over the world, just about everybody we start working with has got to that box where they're legally compliant. But then they think, if we're legally compliant, why are we still having accidents? Why are we still having incidents, near misses? Why are we still injuring people? Well, if procedures are put there to keep people safe, maybe we just need more of them. So they start to write more procedures and add more steps into the procedures they've already got. And the paperwork grows and grows. We'll have more systems of work, more risk assessments, more permits. And we call that becoming system obsessed over towards the right-hand side. You'll hear stories where somebody said, I had a job to do today that took half an hour, but the paperwork before I could start it took 3 hours. Sounds a bit over the top. So as I say, in our 25 years, just about everybody we start working with is somewhere in that middle box. Our job is to help them find out where, so that we can help them move as far up into the next box up that's human focused as possible. Human focused is a very proactive culture. We don't just count the accidents that we've had and tell the HSE. We try and get to the root cause of them, prevent them from happening again. But also human focused is about involving everybody. Everybody's involved in health and safety. Not senior managers, not the health and safety department, but everybody. Everybody's responsible for health and safety. There is a top level fully integrated safety. That's a bit like health and safety heaven. We never have accidents, but we're still looking to improve anyway. Again, in 25 years, we haven't found a company that sits at that level for any length of time. You might find a pocket or a team that does, but then either the job changes, the team changes, or complacency settles in. And that's when your next accident could be around the corner. So as I say, when we assess companies to start with, we find out where on that model they are and then advise them on how they can improve. I mentioned earlier about 5 different parts of the culture. This is them now. So the first one are the procedures, all the written down things that help people do their job. So whether that's risk assessments, permits, safe systems of work, job descriptions, anything that's written down. And with that one, we ask people, who writes them? Do they reflect the job? If you followed the procedures all the time, would you get the job done? Who reviews the procedures? Is it management, health and safety people, or do we involve the front line? The second area is the balance between health and safety and performance or productivity. Are those two things in balance, or is one more important than the other? And does that balance ever change? Maybe after an accident, or when we're coming towards the end of a reporting period and customers are demanding things quicker. The third area, investigation and incident reporting. So do people report things? Do they report near misses that they see, minor injuries that they get? And if people do report things and we have an investigation, how do we treat that investigation? Do we blame people, or do we just find out what happened so that we can learn from it and make sure it doesn't happen again? The fourth area is training and competence. We can train people to do things, but it doesn't necessarily make them competent. So it's about the timing of the training, the quality of the training, and what happens afterwards. Do we support people and buddy systems, that sort of stuff, until they're fully competent? And the final area is safety communication. It's really all communications though. Is it top down, or do we listen to people? And do we talk about the negative and what's wrong and what hasn't gone right, or do we celebrate the successes as well and talk about the positives? So as you can see there, those 5 areas make up a culture. And you'll see that this is a bar graph with some numbers above them. This is a real result from a company. And and the results are out of a total of 5. Obviously, the higher the better. What we usually find is when we do a culture assessment that there are 2 areas that are a little bit lower than the others. And we call that the critical pair. And you can see in this example, it's the health and safety, performance, balance, and training and competence. And if we look at those areas first after the survey and concentrate on them and try and improve them, we'll probably see the best benefits before we move on to the other areas. As I said earlier, we talk to management and frontline people separately, which means that when we do look at the results of a survey, you can see the results across all the different bandings. So you've got an overall company result there. And as you see, managers tend to see it better than it is, and frontline tend to see it worse than it is. The reason for that is that managers don't always see what's going on out in the front line. And when they do go and see it, usually it's been cleaned up before they get there. I used to say the Queen thinks the whole country smells of fresh paint. So, and then the frontline people, maybe because we haven't asked them before, when they get a chance to tell us how it is, they might overemphasize the bad stuff. So the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. Also, we might be looking at different departments, we might be looking at different sites, depots, so it's worthwhile seeing where some are doing well and we can share that across the others, and where others aren't doing quite so well, so we can target the improvements. And I also said earlier that we benchmark against different comparators within the same industry and similar. And we usually compare people with the last 40 surveys we've done so that we can see where they fall within that range with other people. I'd like to just a little bit of health and safety history now to bring in this thing called the safety wave. Over to the left-hand side, if you went back in time 140 years ago, there were loads of incidents up and down the UK. People died every day in all the different types of industry that we used to have. It's the famous story of the construction of the Forth Rail Bridge. That's that red metal one that goes between Edinburgh and Fife. It's the one they always used to have to keep painting because it took 7 years to paint it from one side to the other. So when they'd finished, they'd have to go back and start it again. Yeah. When they were building the bridge, about 140 years ago, one morning, one of the men fell off in an accident and was killed. Tragic. So his supervisor went straight round to the house, knocked on the door, and when the man's now widow answered the door, he asked her, he told her, "I'm sorry, but your husband's fallen off the bridge and he's dead. So are there any other men in the house then that can come and finish his shift this afternoon?" His own brother went in the afternoon and worked his brother's shift who died in the morning. That's what used to happen back then. We were building a bridge today and somebody died, it would stop. We wouldn't start building it again until the police, the health and safety, insurance people, senior managers were happy. But back then we just cracked on. So around about that time, about 120, 140 years ago, they brought in the first hardware or engineering solutions for health and safety. So harnesses for men working at height, guards for machines, first basic PPE. And as you can see from the diagram, that's that first dip down where it drops because we brought in these improvements. But then as you see then, just above the word software systems, it plateaus. You can only get accidents down so far by having that one type of approach. You've got to do something else. Now, at the end of that plateau is 1974. What happens then? The Health and Safety at Work Act comes in. Now, that's what you might call a software or a system solution to health and safety. It's now no longer optional to protect your employees from the environment they work in. You've got to train people, give them procedures to follow, have a health and safety department, and so on. And as you can see, the second dip there, the law was brilliant. Almost overnight, the number of accidents dropped dramatically. But then it plateaus again. You can see that heading towards the 1980s. You can only get accidents down so far by having those two types of approach. You've got to do something else. And if you don't do anything else, you end up with that squiggly line just above the word people, which we call the safety wave, where you have spates of accidents. Now, if you take that as being the decade of the 1980s, there were lots of accidents that killed lots of people. They didn't happen to the same extent before, and they haven't happened to the same extent since. But during that one decade, there was lots of them. You probably know them all. In the UK, you had Piper Alpha, 1988, North Sea oil rig that blew up and killed 167 people. You had the Dover to Zeebrugge ferry, 1987, the Herald of Free Enterprise, that sank and killed 193 people. London King's Cross Underground fire, 1987, 31 people died there. You had the three football ones, Bradford City fire, Hillsborough, Heysel, all during the 1980s. Then in India, Bhopal, 1984, there's a chemical leak at a pesticide plant, kills 3,000 people in one night. Chernobyl in Ukraine, 1986, nuclear reactor goes up. And then also 1986, Ronald Reagan, the President of the United States of America, wants to put a teacher in space. Space Shuttle Challenger, yeah? Remember on the day of the launch, the engineers said it's too cold. If you try and launch today, these rubber things won't seal. There'll be a gas leak that could ignite, blow up the shuttle, kill everybody on board. All you need to do is wait 2 days and the temperature will be warm enough and everything will be fine. The NASA people said, but wait a minute, if we wait 2 days, then that knocks the whole schedule back by 2 days. So this teacher, Christy McAuliffe, she'll be doing her presentation to the schools on a Sunday to empty classrooms because kids don't go to school at the weekend. What a brilliant reason to kill 7 people. Eh? They made them launch on the original day and exactly what the engineers said would happen happened. Killed everybody on board. So what do you think was going on during the 1980s that led to those kind of accidents? Bearing in mind what's happened before in terms of health and safety, that people are all wrapped up in this personal protective equipment and can't get hurt. And now they've got this health and safety department that will look after health and safety, so I don't need to think about it. What does that lead to? Complacency. People switched off. Classic example being the Dover to Zeebrugge ferry, the Herald of Free Enterprise. That ferry closed its bow doors as it was sailing out of port, rather than closing them before it sailed out of port. Why would they do that? To save time. One of the big things in human nature, which we'll talk about later on. This isn't the first time they closed the bow doors as they were sailing out. They'd done it lots of times before, but everybody had switched off. Nobody was asking the what if question. What if the weather's different? What if the waves are higher? Water will come on the deck. Because of the way this roll-on, roll-off thing's designed, it'll sink. Putting the last two models together, you'll see the only way that you'll break out the safety wave is to get this human-focused approach, where everybody switches back on and thinks health and safety is my responsibility. We look after ourselves and we look after each other. You'll notice the dotted line that comes out the safety wave does not come down to zero because you can't get rid of accidents forever. Why not? Human error. And we'll talk a little bit about human error later on as well. So behavioural safety leadership, what's that all about? Well, it's about getting out and about often enough and at the right time to observe what's happening and have safety conversations with people. There are lots of different types of safety conversation. There are three main ones. The first one is you catch somebody doing something right and you praise it. Okay. Second one is you see somebody behaving unsafely, so you stop them and you challenge the behaviour. You stop them when it's safe to do so and you challenge the behaviour. And the third one is just to keep each other mindful. Well, what's that all about? Well, as human beings, we can only concentrate for 55 minutes an hour. That's the best any of us can manage. The other 5 minutes at least, we switch off and we go into unconscious mode. So we can't look after ourselves all the time. We need people to have conversations with us to keep us alert and keep us safe. When's the right time to have a safety conversation? Well, I guess any time's the right time. But the best time is before somebody starts to do something. Because as soon as we start to do it, we don't like to be interrupted. And as soon as we've finished, we want to go for lunch or we want to go home. You want to catch somebody and get their best attention. Talk to them before they start something. Then it's about asking the right questions about the right things in the right way. So all the open questions are good. Who, what, when, where, why, how, which, but two a little bit better than the rest. The first one's to ask somebody why. Why are you doing it like that? However, there are two ways you can ask why. Some of you might have teenage children. Remember the last time you asked them why they were doing something? How does that sound, the way we talk to teenagers? It usually is accompanied with a pointing finger. Why have you left those there again? How many times do I need to tell you? We call that an accusing why in behavioural safety. We never ever ask an accusing why. We ask the other one. Some of you have got little children. They ask why a lot, don't they? All the time. Why do little kids ask why so much? Because they want the knowledge, they're learning, they want to understand. We call that a curious why. Curiously, why would somebody go ahead and do that without putting their gloves on, for example? And the question that rivals the curious why is the what if question that we mentioned earlier on with the Dover to Zeebrugge ferry. What if this was to go wrong? What if that was to go wrong? Because what behavioural safety leadership is all about is finding out what is happening and why. So if it's good, we can reward it, reinforce it, share it. And if it's not good, we can fix it. We talked about praise there. You know, if you praise somebody, they are 5 times more likely to do the same thing again. A couple of questions for you to ponder on. When was the last time somebody praised you at work? And then also, when was the last time you praised somebody at work? I've just finished reading Sir Alex Ferguson's book, and in it there's an extract that says there's only 2 words you need to say to somebody who's played a good game of football or done a good shift at work. What would they be? Well, there's the answer. Well done. That's all any of us want to hear, and we'll be 5 times as likely to do the same again next time. So please go out there and praise people. This is our cultural safety model, lots of different layers and levels in it, lots of different things in it, but the bit right in the middle there is the culture, and that's what we're talking about today. Culture traditionally made up of 4 things. There's the attitudes, the beliefs of the people. There's the language, how we communicate with each other, verbally and in writing. There are the rituals, well, those are all the different norms of behaviour that build up over time. And then there are the artifacts, those are the physical things, so anything you can see and touch being an artifact. It's commonly held that the hardest one of those to change are the beliefs, because they start when we're really young and they just tend to get stronger and stronger. So what we advise is that we change the other parts of the culture. We improve them, the language, so how we talk about safety, who talks about safety, do we talk about it positively, how we talk about each other, the behaviours, what behaviours do we observe, are they safe behaviours? Or do we need to improve them? And what's the physical stuff like? Tools, the PPE, the guards, the equipment, the machinery, the vehicles, the buildings, anything physical. So we improve the things on the right, and over a period of time, the attitudes and the beliefs will tend to follow. We talk a lot in our courses about human nature, but there's a couple of fundamentals that sort of explain why we are the way we are. And this is one of them. I want you to imagine you've got a new start in the workplace on the front line. They've got a perfect attitude towards health and safety. They've been through all the training, they always use the right equipment, they always wear the right PPE. They just really, really get it. and they've got a newborn baby daughter, and when they come to work, they carry a photograph of their baby daughter in their top pocket. Whenever they come across something that looks a bit dangerous, they take the photograph out and they remember, as we all should, the most important thing is that I come home safe to you every night. They put the photograph back and they always refuse to do the job if it's unsafe. So you've got a picture of what this person's like. They come into the workplace and they are told the safe route to get from A to B is to go up there, along there, and down there. That's the safe route. This person's got a perfect attitude. How will they get from A to B? Well, they'll follow the safe route, won't they? Yeah. However, they notice that everybody else does that, takes a shortcut across the yard, a potentially unsafe route. What will all these people taking the shortcut do to that person who's going round the long way? How do we treat people that are different? We tend to do three things to them. We ridicule them, we ignore them, we bully them. Those are the three things we hate the most, to be ridiculed and ignored and bullied. So this person is left with only two choices. One is to follow what everybody else is doing, and the other one is to leave, because they will do anything to get away from being ridiculed, ignored, and bullied. Now, at this point, you might think, no, surely they should keep going round the long way, because that's the safe behaviour, and try and influence other people. Well, if it was you, of course you should, because you've probably all got influence that you've built up over your experience, maybe your personality in the workplace, your competence, those sorts of things. But how much influence do you have on the first day on the job on the front line? None. So their choices are do what we do or leave. Now, you would hope they'd have the courage of their convictions to say, my daughter's more important than this, I'm going to go and work somewhere safer. The job's been the way they are, the economy the way it is, they have to provide for their daughter. So the temptation will be leave the photograph at home, come into work, do what everybody else is doing, and just cross their fingers and hope for the best instead. How sad's that? This person had a perfect attitude, but it's been knocked out of them because of the culture where they've gone to work. Only it gets worse because the health and safety manager comes to visit the site and sees everybody cutting across the yard. So what would health and safety typically do about that? What would they put up to stop people going across? Maybe a barrier? Probably a sign, yeah? And they'll run some awareness courses telling people about the dangers of cutting across, and if we catch you, we'll discipline you. Brilliant, that fixes it, doesn't it? Yeah. What will the people do when the health and safety manager's gone away? Somebody will move the barrier. Everybody will say, oh, look, the barrier's down, you can go across. They'll ignore the sign because signs become wallpaper very quickly and people will go across anyway. Now, in the past, they walked across looking for traffic. How are they getting across now and what are they looking for? Looking for the health and safety manager and probably rushing. They've just made this worse. As well-meaning as traditional health and safety is, they'd have been better off doing nothing because they've made this more dangerous. Now, when we understand in behavioural safety that every single one of us will do anything we can to save time, effort, and energy, then you see this totally differently, and the solution is totally different as well. On my courses, I've normally got a lot longer than this, and we could go into why we want to save time, effort, and energy, and it goes back to when we were first here as in hunters and gatherers, and how much time we spent out doing the dangerous stuff, and how much time back in the safety of the cave, conserving our effort and our energy. Don't have time to go into all that today. But just to make it even simpler, everybody wants to do what is quickest and easiest. Traditional health and safety just made this worse. Now that we know that everybody wants to do what's quickest and easiest, what's the solution? Well, make A to B safe. Number one rule in behavioural safety, make the easy way safe. Make the traffic go a different way. Okay, what if you couldn't do that? We're based in Office A and we've been told to go to a meeting in Office B, but you can't get across safely. What could you do with the meeting? Well, you could move it to A, do away with the need to go to B. You could have it over Microsoft Teams. Or, well, no, we need to meet face-to-face and A doesn't have the right facilities, but maybe C does. So what you're doing there is you're exploring the different options. When you do that, please involve the people who have to do the behaviour afterwards. Because if they feel involved in the problem and the solution, they're much more likely to go with it. Okay, what if you've involved the people and there isn't a solution? We've done the first part of the process in warehouse A. The next part has to be done in warehouse B. There's no alternative. You've got to go there, but you can't get across safely. Well, I guess you try and make the long route a bit easier. So make the safe way easier. It works the same as make the easy way safe. It works both ways round. But what do you do with the unsafe route? You don't have a little barrier up that people can move. You put a big brick wall up, make it physically impossible for people to go across. Now, there was a lot in that, but just to summarise it, the number one rule in behavioural safety, always look to make the easy way safe. If you can't do that, involve the people to explore the different options. But ultimately, you've got to make the unsafe behaviour as difficult as possible, because you'll never change human nature. And human nature says we want to save time, effort, and energy whenever we can. Moving on from that, let's have a look at human error. Okay, just a couple of the ways we can get things wrong. We've got 7 basic human emotions. I want you to think, which one do you see now? And you probably all saw anger straight away. Yeah, that picture comes from a book called Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. Kahneman with a K. Really good book, by the way. He won the Nobel Prize for his work in this area. Kahneman says we've got 2 ways of thinking. This is one of them, which he calls fast or system 1. It's your automatic reaction to things. It's your reflex. It's your impulse. You don't have to work anything out. Bang, you just see it straight away. He says we've also got slow or system 2 thinking, and that's what this sum's an example of. So 17 times 24. What is it? 17 times 4 is 68. I carry the 6 across. You look at somebody else trying to work this sum out inside their head, you will see their pupils in their eyes have constricted, physiology in their face will change, their breathing starts to change, their muscles will start to tighten up, even slightly. Why? Because we don't like doing that. Why don't we like doing it? Because it takes time, effort, and energy. So more often than not, we settle for that, the automatic reaction. Why? Because it's quicker and it's easier. Now, most of the time we do it, we'll get it right. But every now and again, when we use that automatic reaction, that quick impulse, it can be wrong. And we'll have a look at an example or 2 in a minute. Now, the only time your body language returns to normal is if you give up with the sum or you work out that the answer is. Anybody got 408? Well done, you're a system 2 thinker. Now, most of us don't switch on system 2. We go with the automatic reaction all the time. I'm going to see if I can help you to switch on your system 2 now. I want you to imagine you walk into a shop and you buy a bat and a ball. Now, they're not in a pack. There's no discount. Just a bat off one shelf, a ball off the other. You put them on the counter and the shopkeeper says, £1.10, please. The bat costs £1 more than the ball. So how much does the ball cost? If you're thinking 10 pence, you've fallen for the trap, okay? Because if the ball costs 10 pence and the middle statement says the bat costs exactly £1 more than the ball, well, that will be £1.10. When you add those 2 together, you get 120, not 110. So though it's everybody's automatic reaction to say 10, it's wrong. Only if your system 2 switched on, if you said 5 pence for the ball, well done, you've got it right. Just another one, just to show how your automatic reaction can be wrong. These 2 lines on the page are the same length because I copied and pasted them. But look what happens when I do this. They don't look the same length now, do they? So if you had somebody come into your room now and you pointed at your screen and says, which one of those lines is longer? Their automatic reaction, system 1, would probably say the top one. We use that automatic reaction most of the time, but every now and again it gets it wrong. And that's one of the ways that we can have accidents. Okay, which way is the lady spinning? Now I'm guessing some of you will be seeing clockwise, but if you're sitting with somebody else, chances are they might see anti-clockwise. Or even if you're both seeing it the same way, suddenly she will go the other way. No 2 people see this the same. There's 59 people on this call at the moment, and I'll argue there's 59 different ways that this is being 60 different ways that this is being seen at the moment. Some people see clockwise, some anti-clockwise, some see both, some people just see their legs swinging side to side. Again, there's a lot of neuroscience and evidence as to why that might be, but basically we all see the world differently. So is my little map of the world right? Well, no, my little map of the world is a little bit different from yours and the next person's. So if the three of us were about to do a hands-on task, we should have a safety conversation about it before we start, shouldn't we? To say how we all see it, so that collectively we see it better than we did individually. So bearing in mind human beings make mistakes and everybody sees things differently, we really need to have a just culture. And that's where we learn from accidents rather than blaming people from them. If I was running a 3-day leadership course with you, we could go all the way through this model and do a big case study afterwards. But for today, we've got about 10 minutes left. So we'll touch on certain bits of it. An unsafe act can have quite a number, as you can see on the right-hand side there, of root causes or reasons. But to start off with, it will be an error or a violation. So first of all, we're going to think, well, what's the difference between an error and a violation? Well, it's all about intention to break the rules. For it to be a violation, there has to be a rule and you have to intend to break it. You've got to mean it. If you didn't know what the rule was or there wasn't a rule, it's an error. It's only a violation when you knowingly break the rules. So errors can be skill-based errors or mistakes. So we'll have a look at skill-based errors today. Slips and lapses. So I'm drying the dishes at night and a plate slips out of my hand and smashes, a physical slip of action. Or I'm drying the dishes, somebody shouts on me, I get distracted, a mental lapse, and it smashes. So you might think, well, what was that, a slip or a lapse? It doesn't matter, they both come under skill-based errors, we treat them the same. So what if my job is working in the Savoy Hotel kitchen, drying dishes for 10 hours a night? How would you minimise the number of plates that drop and smash in that kitchen? What would really help me over 10 hours? Well, you'll probably say regular breaks, yeah? Can't concentrate for an hour, let alone 10 hours, so give me regular breaks. If I dropped a plate, what would stop it smashing? Well, I guess some sort of soft landing area, rubber matting. What would stop it coming out my hands in the first place? Rubber gloves. Maybe a bit of job rotation, so if you're washing them and I'm drying them, they're both boring, but at least they're different. We swap over every now and again. It could help to keep me mentally alert. And what's the best substance to keep you mentally alert over a period of 10 hours? Think very carefully before you answer. It is a drink, but which drink do you think it is? If you said coffee, caffeine, Monster, Red Bull, sorry, that's great for up to an hour, but when it wears off, you'll end up below where you were. Water is the right answer. Well done if you got that, because water has the two things that your brain craves. It oxygenates it, it hydrates it. So together with some food and some rest, we can keep going for long periods of time. You notice what we did there? We worked our way through to the root causes of slips and lapses, and we had 5 or 6 different solutions, none of which changed the person's behaviour directly. So what did we do? We gave them regular breaks, water at work, rubber gloves, rubber matting, job rotation. Every one of those things was outside the person, but they all made the safe behaviour easy. That's behavioural safety. We work through to the root cause 9 times out of 10. We change the environment to change the behaviour. We don't change the behaviour itself. And the other thing the Just Culture model does, or rather doesn't do, it doesn't blame. There was no blame there. What if you blame me? It says, Quentin, you're dropping too many plates. If you drop any more plates tonight, I'm going to sack you, or I'm going to start taking the money out of your wages. How's that going to make me behave? Probably nervous, yeah? More likely to drop a plate. And if I did drop one and it smashed, what would I be tempted to do? Yeah, hide it. So Just Culture is great. Work through to the root cause without blame and fix the thing nearest to the root cause. Violations, we just do need to touch on a couple of them because that's breaking the rules on purpose. We sack people for that, don't we? Well, maybe not, because as you can see on the right, there's lots of different reasons why somebody might break the rules on purpose. I'd argue there's a rule that most of us on this call, 59 people at the moment, are probably guilty of breaking. Not all, but most. The speed limit, yeah, we know what the speed limit is, and most of the time we're breaking it, we know we're breaking it. So that makes it a violation. However, if we all do it, or I do it all the time, that's a routine violation, the top of the list there. And routine violations are really dangerous. I don't know if you're in your other health and safety work, you've come across the Heinrich triangle, sometimes called Bird's triangle or the accident triangle, with fatalities at the top, then major accident injuries, then minor accidents and injuries, near misses, and then unsafe acts and unsafe conditions at the bottom. Well, one person breaking the speed limit is an unsafe act at the bottom of Heinrich's triangle. We're saying most people do it, so we're filling up the triangle, aren't we? So routine violation is really dangerous. If you've got a routine violation in your workplace, the first question to ask is the rule right? If everybody's breaking the rule on purpose, maybe it's outdated, maybe we need to change the rule. But if everybody agrees that's the right rule and we should have it, then that's, I guess, where you'll enforce it, because otherwise we're filling up the triangle. A situational violation is where I would normally follow the rules, but today I either don't have enough time or I don't have the right tool or equipment, but I'm going to go ahead anyway. But what if every day I turn up, I've never got the right tool or equipment? What does a situational violation become? Routine, and we've said how dangerous they are. The solutions, as you can see, for the situational violation is to make sure that people do have the right tools and equipment and time in order to do the job safely. Just one last one to look at, because it's a little bit strange, an exceptional violation. That's where it's safer to break the rule than it is to follow it. Classic example was on Piper Alpha, the North Sea oil rig. They didn't have many rules, but they had one golden rule. If you're evacuating an oil rig, you never, ever, ever do what? Jump in the water. Everybody that followed the rule died. 66 men, because it was all men, 66 men that broke the rule lived. There was a 100-foot cut-off point. If you jumped from above that, the fall tended to kill them. But those that made their way down lower and jumped were the ones that lived. So what if you were having a safety conversation with somebody in your work and you asked them, do you do that the way the procedure said? And they said, no, I do it this way because I think it's safer. And they were right. What would you do? Hopefully, you'd change the procedure, praise and reward the person, and tell everybody else you found a safer way of doing things. So that's just culture. That, folks, brings me to the end of my part of the presentation. So thanks ever so much for listening. I hope you found it interesting, but hopefully more than that, I hope you found it relevant and useful. And I'm now ready for any questions, if anybody's got any.
Thank you for that, Quentin. Really interesting presentation. Funny thing, when I was checking through your presentation earlier, when I looked at the spinning lady, she was going anti-clockwise. I glanced away and looked back and she was going clockwise. I couldn't for the life of me figure out how that happened, but she just kept changing directions. So don't know what that says about me. We have 3 questions for you. The first one is from Lauren. It's a 2-part question. Are the critical pair always the same or different depending on the organisational culture? And do you always focus on, in brackets, these 2 areas first?
Good question, Laura. And I should have said it clearer, I think. Yeah, no, they can change. It could be any 2 of the 5. And we don't always find there's a critical pair, but usually there is 2 areas. It could be any 2 of the areas that are a bit lower. And we found with experience that if you concentrate on them first after the survey, then you'll get the best results, and it actually helps you do the other ones as well.
Thank you for that. The next question is from ASEP. What's the best safety leadership model to be implemented in oil and gas arena?
Oh, best safety leadership model. I probably would need a little bit more information about what they mean by the question on that one before I.
Okay, let's move on to the next one. And then
if we get a little bit more information, yeah.
Yeah, if we get any more information. This comes in 2 parts, quite a long question, so I'll try and do it justice. This one's from Simon. Which comes first, the business culture or safety culture? And why isn't leadership of the, and then in brackets, of the business by OHS staff, by supervisors, as well as from government regulators and industry, one of the areas of culture you analyse? That was a bit of a long question.
Well, it's 2, isn't it, in one there?
Yeah.
So is it which came first, the business culture or the safety culture?
Yes, that was the first part.
Okay, again, I could interpret the question in a couple of different ways. I'd say in terms of your culture, it's all at once, it's all there at the same time. But if we're thinking, well, what does an organisation concentrate on? What should they concentrate on? Should it be the business side of things or the safety side of things? Well, I would argue you don't have a business if you don't have safety, so it should always be safety is the most important thing that we do. Some companies will say, oh yeah, safety is our #1 priority, but priorities can change, can't they? So we say safety is not a priority, it's a value, it's just something that we do. I don't know if that answers the question. Now, what was the second part of the question again, Julie?
The second part was, and why isn't leadership, and then in brackets of the business by OHS staff, supervisors, government regulators and industry, one of the areas of culture you analyse?
I think leadership is within it. Leadership's within every part of those five parts of the culture. If we talk about the procedures, well, are the leaders involving the frontline people in reviewing and looking at the procedures to make sure they're fit for purpose? If we're talking about the safety productivity balance, what sort of messages are the leaders giving? There's a famous one where the manager says, I want this job done safely, but I want it done by 4 o'clock. Or I want this job done by 4 o'clock, but I want it done safely. You might think, well, that's the same thing, but people remember what comes after the but. So the one that says but safely is right. The one that says but 4 o'clock is wrong. So there's a lot, and then there's the other parts as well. A good leader will send the people on the right training at the right time and develop them and support them afterwards. So I think leadership is within all of the parts of the culture in the same way that communication is.
Thank you. The next question, I'm not actually sure what this question means. Trailing cable is unsafe act or unsafe condition because somebody did it. Does that make?
Oh yeah, no, it makes sense. It's the chicken and egg one there, isn't it? Because why is because I always say there's always a reason. So if there's a trailing cable, my first thing will be, well, why is there a trailing cable? So it is an unsafe act if somebody's left it trailing there. If it was fitted right and it's over time fallen down, well, then maybe that's an unsafe condition then. So it just depends on the situation, I would say. And it's a good point though, because one thing I would say is not to get too hung up on whether something is an unsafe act or an unsafe condition, in the same way that a lot of companies get so distraught about determining what a near miss is. Because is it a near hit, or is it actually, if it's a minor injury, was that different? And I would just say, it doesn't matter what it is, just tell us about it. Have a really good system for people to report things that's quick and easy, because you don't want to spend time, effort and energy on things. Make it easy for me to report it, but then make sure somebody looks at it afterwards to try and fix it. But don't get too caught up in all the categorizations.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions for now. Steve, did you want to come on? Do you have any questions, or do you want to say some closing words?
Yeah, I'll put my camera back on. I'm not sure if you can see me, but not just to say thanks, Quentin, for excellent presentation. Really informative, really interesting. I think safety culture affects every single person's organisation. It's such an important one, and it is a challenging one to try and change that culture. And it does start with, like you said, is identifying where you're at to start with and putting the structure in place to try and change that. And it doesn't happen overnight, but really interesting presentation. I'm not sure whether you're able to share some of the slides, or at least a link to your information. Maybe we can circulate that post the meeting. But
yeah, well, Julie's got copies of the slides, so
yes.
I don't mind people just looking at them, but not to use them, obviously. But if it's reminded to people, to be honest, our website is on the last page, so people can go on and have a look and see what we do there. My email address and phone number are on the last page as well. So if anybody wants to get in touch about anything, please do so. Yeah.
Yeah, and you will receive a link to the recording on the IIRSM YouTube channel as well. We've just had one late question in from Lauren, actually, if you don't mind answering this one. You mentioned that you focus on middle management, e.g. team leaders and managers who have the biggest impact on culture. Do you do any work with senior leadership?
Yeah. So what we normally have to do is convince the senior leaders to do it, because they usually pay for it, and they arrange it all and make sure people can get off work and everything. So we do a presentation on the survey results, usually to the senior team. Usually takes about an hour and a half, go through a PowerPoint presentation, a little similar to what you had, but a lot more in-depth results on what they've got. Some of the comments that people have given us, together with conclusions and recommendations. That buys in the senior team. The sort of middle management, next level down, they still need an awareness, because they can block it. They always say there's this middle level of management where the good news doesn't pass down through them and the bad news doesn't pass up through them either. So we need to get them on board as well. But the critical level are the sort of frontline managers, first line supervisors, team leaders, because the behaviours day in, day out, they're the ones that see it, they're the ones that drive it in their behaviours as well. Good
Great,
question.
thank you. We just had 2 more questions in, if you've got time to answer them.
I've got time, yeah.
One of them is, what do we do when rules say we need to wear safety glasses when humid?
Very good question. Some companies have blanket rules that say, well, everybody wears the safety glasses, you know, and it's even in an area where you really wouldn't think you'd need to wear them, but it's so much easier to police it, if you like, if you just make everybody wear them. But what you do there is you take away common sense, you take away people's personal ability to make the right decision. So firstly, I would say that you only need to wear the safety glasses in areas that they're needed and at the time that it's needed. But in that area, yeah, it could be humid, it might steam up. I would remember what I was saying earlier about change the environment in order to change the behavior. So I would be thinking about putting air conditioning in, changing the environment in some way so that the glasses don't steam up. Is there a different type of glasses or something that you can put on them that stops them steaming up? Those sorts of things. You've got to do the toss up between, well, if I wasn't wearing glasses, am I actually safer than I am wearing a pair of glasses that are steamed up? You know, if I can't stop them steaming up. So, and that's where you hope that the company will be responsible and have those conversations with you. Because at the end of the day, if something goes wrong, you're going to talk to the HSE, aren't you? And they're going to ask you, so what did you do? And if you can show that you've taken all reasonably practicable steps and you did what you thought was right, taking all the information into consideration, you're in a much stronger position than if you just impose things or you just let things go.
Great, thank you. I'll make this the last one. How do leadership manage a unionised environment where the union use safety as a negotiation tool, but not encourage them to practice the same? Interesting.
Yeah, it was a brilliant question, and it's very true. When I start working with any company, one of my first questions is, do you have a trade union? What are they like? You know, are they quite proactive? Are they? And I want to speak to them first. I want to get them on board, because everybody would agree that good safety is good business and it's a good idea. The most important thing is that everybody goes home safe every night. So if you can involve the union early and get them on board, and it's almost like it's part of their program, they'll go with it. If you do things despite the union, then you're going to have problems, aren't you? Because we're not involving people. We should be involving them. We should be involving everybody.
Great, thank you. And that's all the questions. So it just leaves me to thank you so much for your presentation. I found it really interesting. Thank you, Steve, the Chair of the Wales branch, for organising today's webinar. Your CPD certificates will come out this time tomorrow, and the recording will be placed on the IIRSM YouTube channel, probably later today or sometime tomorrow if you want to share it with a colleague. So I wish everyone a good afternoon or a good evening wherever you're based in the world, and we hope to see you at our next webinar. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.